Hey, I'm Morgan Helton. I'm an engineer at Flox. Today I want to show you something new we're working on, imageless Kubernetes. Now I actually enjoy working with Kubernetes, which I know can sound weird, but once it's up and running, it's incredibly powerful. You get access to this whole ecosystem of tools around networking and secrets management, observability and storage, and it's all standardized with consistent APIs. But the one thing that's always been a pain for me is managing container images. Now there's a huge ecosystem around it. There's tools for building, scanning, distributing, and maintaining images, but no matter what, you still end up spending time waiting for builds or dealing with image compatibility across architectures and operating systems. So at Flox, we started asking, what if we could skip that whole step? What if the same Flox environment you're already using for development could run directly in Kubernetes without building a container image at all? That's what imageless Kubernetes does. You define your environment once, maybe on your Apple Silicon Mac, and then you can run that same setup directly on your cluster. No image builds, no registry push. And because it's a Flox environment, it's deterministic and reproducible. There's no hidden apt install or layers you can't account for. You know exactly what's running in your pod, and you can intentionally control when and how it changes. That means it's also built with security by construction. Your SBOM is the environment definition. We accomplish this by extending the standard runtime used by Containerd, the same one that powers most containers, to deploy the Flox environment into the container file system and configuration. That means you get all the same isolation you expect from a typical container, but with the benefit of running from a Flox environment instead of a container image. Let's take a look at a few examples. So first, I'll start by creating a Flox environment, adding a few packages to it, and pushing it to Flox Hub. So I'll start by initializing a Flox environment, and then I'll install a couple of packages. I'll install fastfetch and cowsay, and then I'll push this environment to Flox Hub. Now, I'm going to write a pod specification that will use that environment to run on the cluster. So there's two things that I have to do. First, I have to define the runtime class. And so what this does is this is what's used to tell Containerd what runtime to use to create containers in the pod. And the second thing I have to do is pass an annotation that's used to tell the runtime what Flox environment to start the pod with. And I'll go get the same name of the environment that I pulled from before, and now I'll apply the pod. And now I'll use K9s to kind of visualize what's happening. Now our pod is started. And if I exec into it, I have fastfetch, and I have cowsay. But again, I used an empty Docker image, so this was entirely populated with the contents of the Flox environment. Now let's scale it up a bit. I have a pair of manifests here, one for a Redis server and one for an app I wrote and published to Flox Hub that uses the Redis server. So first, let's look at the Redis manifest. So this deployment's using an environment that it pulls from Flox Hub that we actually published that contains a Redis server. So we can look at that real quick. So you can see in Flox Hub, this is Flox Redis, and it just contains the Redis package and then something cute for the startup. So over here, you can see we start the Redis server, we background it, and then we write our data to this empty dir volume mount. And then the Redis server is exposed with a service so it can be reached by other things that need to use it. And then I also have this quotes deployment. So the quotes deployment also pulls from a Flox Hub environment, but this one's a little different. So the quotes app environment actually contains a package from Flox Hub. You can see it's Flox quotes app go. So I can see here, this is a package that I built locally and pushed to Flox Hub. So this is running a piece of code that I wrote. So let's go back and look. So I have both of these running in the cluster. So we can see here, I have the Redis server. And if I look at the logs, it's running Redis, it looks normal. And then I have the quotes deployment, but I actually have 3 replicas of it. So I'm able to scale Flox pods the same way I can scale conventional pods. And I can look at the logs and I can see the server's running. If I go over to services, I can see that the quote service is running and it is targeting all 3 of the pods. And then I can actually port forward it. And then I can hit it and it serves quotes to me. So that's an example of what's possible with imageless Kubernetes. You can compose environments, you can push them to Flox Hub and use either normal applications from the catalog, or you can pull applications that you built and published. And that's imageless Kubernetes. You can take your Flox environments, the exact ones you use for development, and run them directly on Kubernetes. It's fast, reproducible, deterministic, and built with security by construction. Combine that with Flox's build and publish features, and you can manage the full lifecycle of your environments from dev to production without ever touching a Docker file.